Hello guys, it's John here doing another Reimagining Beyblade Burst episode. This is episode 9, specifically BU Extended Part 3. Basically, I've just been going down every single line of bays and giving them a DB/BU evolution. This will be for every motif from God and Chosets, at least the ones that haven't been covered yet, whether it be actual releases or previous parts of the series, but yeah. As per usual, having art done or modeling done is out of scope for me, both just my own ability to actually do something like that or, well, commissioning it, so I will just be explaining how I would personally make these bays rather than doing anything else, because that's all I could really do. So anyway, let's just go ahead and get into the first of the bays for this episode. Alright, so our first bay will be Paramount Garuda Sun Soar 0. First up, Garuda. This is a pretty interesting core to make because obviously it has the whole no teeth idea. So for this one, there won't be any teeth. There will be a rubber part inside, similar to like the, Bahamut core or Kirbyus core. No outside pieces, just the inside one, which makes it worse. But there will be one BU block, so it does have the one BU block to use, so there's that. Also for the armor, you do have 0, so that's pretty nice. Just works with the overall bay, I think. Next up here, the Paramount Blade. This blade would basically... It'd literally just be a giant circle, like this. Obviously, Wind already does that, but this would be even larger. I'd say about 1.2 times the size of Wind, which is already huge, so this blade would just be gigantic. No extra gimmicks, it's just meant to be a giant. Next up, Sun. The Sun Disc is very similar to the Moon Disc, BU Lock Disc with the plastic on the outside, just kind of a larger version of Moon. Very circular, there you go. And lastly, the driver would be Soar. Soar is kind of like a mix of Revolve and Flugel. So, how would I describe this? It sort of has the Flugel blades, but like kind of the bottom of Revolve. That's like the best way to go. So basically, it's like almost like the same tip in a way, but with the plate and then these blades above said plate. So yeah, pretty similar to Maximum Garuda, just a DB version of it. But again, I think that the parts, again, give it its own unique driver, which I think would be nice. Give it a proper, armor. Go base the core on what we have here, and then of course for the disc and blade, just have it be giant. To really mimic this bay. I think that just works the best overall. Alright, the next bay will be Draft Jinnius Moon Century 6. So Moon, I think it just kind of works with the bay here, personally. It's round, it's large, I mean, this thing has like 5 glaive, it's like close enough, I would say. And then 6, I just think, you got the 6 blades on the layer here, so we'll just use 6. As far as the other parts go, the actual Jinnius core will be just 2 sets of U-blocks. Nothing crazy. Now, the Draft Blade. This would basically be like the the Blast Jinnius gimmick, where, yes, it moves upward. However, after reaching this highest point, it would then move downward, and it would just kind of be able to constantly move up and down. I think this would just kind of evolve it in a way that'd be kind of cool. And then lastly, we have, well, Sentry. Sentry would be kind of similar to Guard. I would say this ball would be a little bit larger. It is stationary still, but yeah, a little bit of a larger ball. This outer piece, this part would come down, and yeah, it would be free spin. Kind of like a larger Moment, except the main ball in here is stationary rather than free spinning, so yeah. Just kind of a slightly different, a larger version of Moment, effectively. Just feel like that makes the most sense for this. It's a pretty basic one. Jinnius, bit of a weird bay, but yeah, just kind of gives it a DB version, I would say. Alright, moving on. We have Ωptimal Ωrichalcum Open Observe Omega. So, first up for the layer, we have the Ωrichalcum core. This would have 4 sets of BU locks and also a clamp ability. The clamp ability would basically have a midsection similar to the actual Ωrichalcum layer, where it would basically be able to, when spinning, these parts would come in to clamp down on the driver. So that's like the main gimmick of the core. Also, the armor, the Omega armor, it would just kind of be this shape. It'd be very round with like two little orb-like things on the sides. Just, yeah, kind of mimicking the Orichalcum shape. So, there you go. Next up, we have the Optimal Blade. This would be very similar to this. It just pops out while spinning. I mean, that's really all there is to it. Can't really connect it to the clampability, I don't think, so I'm just leaving that alone. It sticks out, gives you a little bit of extra, resistance, I guess, and that's really all there is to it. But then we have the open disc. This would be kind of like, whatever, oh, not Omega, Outer. I could not remember the name for a second there for some reason. Anyway, it'd be like Outer where, it's painted and stuff, but kind of a similar shape to Outer. But open, it'd be a B-lock disc that is full metal. Yeah, every B-lock disc was, something with plastic. This would just be a full metal B-lock disc, which is kind of cool. Has the same outer shape, so there you go. And then we, of course, have the driver, Observe. Observe would be kind of like this. Sort of. So, basically, this part here would be a free-spinning metal ball instead of kind of this awkward, like, sharp thing. It'd just be a big free-spinning metal ball. Fully free-spinning. No free-spin on an axis, just like orbit or something. It's just fully free-spin. Because, why not? It just kind of works. And then we also have this giant metal piece, which would be very similar to this, except it'd be free-spin, yeah. The actual metal piece itself would be able to free-spin, because, again, why not? This bay is a little bit awkward and maybe a little bit stupid even, but I don't know, I find it kind of fun. So I decided to just go with this concept because, again, why not just make a really wild, weird version of a DB Orichalcum? Because this thing's already kind of awkward. Also, it is worth mentioning that Observe would also have these ridges that Octa has, and that is meant to be used with the clamp ability, which again would be replicated on the core of Orichalcum in this version, so there you go, I guess. Alright, next up we have Secure Regulus Load Spire-10. First up, yeah, 10 armor. I just find it to kind of work with this thing. Also, the load disc is kind of a four-sided, 4 main protrusions, just disc. No B-lock disc, just regular disc. It was the one that I gave to my Gatling Dragon kind of reimagining, and should work with that, I think, fairly well. Just kind of makes sense with this thing, in my opinion. Anyway, Regulus would have 3 sets of U-locks just for accessibility's sake. And then the Secure Blade. This would start off extended, but then retract as it spins, the opposite of this. So you'd start off in attack mode with these things out, but then as it loses spin, it becomes more defensive. Also, we have the driver. The driver is, of course, Spire Dash. Spire Dash would start off very tall, even probably a bit taller than this thing. But as it would, spin, it would become shorter over time. To help try and stabilize the bay, it obviously has to become its shortest mode probably by around half spin, because if it were to lower kind of constantly, it meant to be very low as it's like losing a lot of spin, then it would just fall over. So I think you have to kind of counterbalance that to where when it's around half spin, it's all the way to the ground, because otherwise, again, yeah, it would just topple over too easily. Also, the bottom, this would just be a similar shape, but it'd just be entirely metal, because I think it just kind of needs to be that to function properly. So it's kind of an inverse of what Shelter Regulus is, instead of, starting off in kind of a defensive mode, becoming more attack-oriented for the layer, and, the driver constantly grows. Instead, it would constantly shrink, and then the outside would also go in attack mode, go inward for defense. I just think that makes way more sense, and this thing was just kind of dumb otherwise, so that's my kind of rework for the concept. Next up, we have Pulse Kukulcan beneath Eradicate-1. So first up, I do think that the one armor, technically it's two-sided, but I feel like this one's kind of like the main one. I always felt like, maybe that's just me, but yeah. So I opted to give it the one armor because of that, and then also, Eradicate Dash. It is meant to be a proper right rubber flat. Explosion Dash kind of has the same shape, but I feel like it's too short, and I'd also not have this free spinning part here, but, just make it kind of a larger version of this. Not larger, like wider, just a little bit taller maybe. Maybe change the rubber to be a little softer as well, and not have this part, so yeah. I gave this one to my version of kind of a DB Death Scyther, so reusing Eradicate Dash from that. Anyway. Moving on to the Kukulcan core. This would have one set of U-locks, that is it. Next up, the Pulse Blade. This would basically just work like this. Once it, clicks, it just unlock it, and these parts would be able to stick out as they do now. I would have this part actually be able to stick out a little bit more on the front here. This one would stick out a little bit less, but still, both would stick out. That's how the blade would work. So yeah, anyway. Actually, I forgot to mention, it actually be after the BU lock unlocks, so I think I just said it unlocks. I meant to say BU lock, so anyway. After the BU lock is unlocked, then these parts will come out, so there you go. And if you don't use a BU lock disc, they just kind of flail around, and that just kind of is what it is. Anyway. Moving on to the actual new disc, it is called Beneath. Beneath is a BU lock disc, and it's basically meant to mimic Under, where the actual plastic is kind of a lower down, like Under was positioned on the disc, But instead of being a frame, it's just kind of the whole disc is meant to accommodate that idea. So yeah, just a DB version of Kukulcan, so nothing too crazy here. Alright, our next bay is going to be Nemesis Xanthus Swell-2. So I think 2 obviously makes sense for this bay based, as the two sides, the twin Nemesis, the name. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Xanthus, it's meant to kind of replicate hits, just having like the one main point here. Xanthus, I just think makes sense in that regard, so there you go. Yes, I know in my earlier video I did replace hit with dagger, but I don't know, I thought it was like funny to use Xanthus, I guess, and yeah, it makes sense. I feel like for an evolution of this thing it's fine, but like, I don't know, Twin Nemesis I felt like it should be not hit, but for an evolution I'm like, yeah, I think this is fine, so I use Xanthus for that. Anyway, as far as the new parts go, we of course have the Nemesis core, 2 sets of BU locks, that's it. The Beyblade, this would basically just be this. It's an expanded version of this, maybe contact points are a little bit more dynamic, but yeah. You could switch between upper attack or smash attack modes. The biggest thing here would be the driver, Swell Dash. Basically, it would be a small rubber flat, very small, maybe hunter-like, or you could bring down a extra coat of rubber, not rubber plastic, what am I saying? Basically, there's like a piece of rubber around the main rubber part that you can either have up or down. Having it up basically just makes it kind of act like Hunter in a way. But you could bring it down, and by bringing it down, it's now a very large rubber flat, so you can kind of choose how you want to manage that in a way. I thought that would be kind of interesting. However, while you can lock it in either mode, you can also launch it unlocked. And by having it unlocked, it would actually reference Ultimate Reboot. While again, I did change the driver in my earlier video, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to kind of bring it back into play in some way. So what you could do is, when you have it unlocked, it would start off in the small mode, but then the outer rubber piece would kind of come down as, it spins, and then eventually hitting the ground to kind of make it more aggressive over time, sort of giving it a reboot-like function, but in a different way. Hopefully the idea makes sense, but yeah. That's kind of my idea for a modern Nemesis. This one I feel like was a little bit more dynamic, so it's always nice to have, because some of these I feel like are just adaptations, but I want to make some of them at least a little bit more interesting, but others are harder to do, and it's hard to really deviate too much. But I think this was one where I'm like, yeah, I could take some liberties, so hopefully this is a cool concept for a new Nemesis. Alright, now we get to this mess. I've been wondering how to tackle Eclipse. I'm just going to read out the names of the unfused forms, and then I'll read out the name of the fused one. So, first up we have Supernova Apollos Rupture Shift-13. Then we also have Collapse Artemis Rupture Shift-13. So they use the same parts. It's just a different blade and core. However, you can also fuse them to make BlackHole Eclipse Rupture Shift-13. I'm going to go ahead and go over the armor, disc, and driver first, just to get them out of the way. And then I'll get into kind of the core and blades, because there are multiple of them. First up, the 13 armor, you basically have 6 jagged points and then 7 smooth points on each side. There you go. Kind of the half and half idea, like this. Or no, I meant 7 jagged contact points and 6 smooth ones. Sorry, I got those backwards. Anyway, so yeah, again, kind of referencing Apollos on one side, Artemis on the other to make the Eclipse idea. Then we of course have the disc, Rupture. Rupture is a view-lock disc that has 4 main points. You know, you have the metal on the inside and the outside plastic, and then there's little bits of metal on the outside, and you basically would be able to position these in different ways. You would have sort of these, well, each one could go into 2 different points. There's kind of like a star shape, like you'd have one, let me move these, like 1, 2, 3, 4, but then you could also have like 1, 2, 3, 4. So you could have like 2 spikes next to each other, or like 4 just on each corner. So you kind of move these 4 spikes around, and the idea would be for Artemis, you'd have the 2 clustered together. For Apollos, you'd have them like out here like this. And for Eclipse, you'd have one side out, the other side in. That's the idea behind it. You can obviously customize however you please, but that's just like the base concept for the idea. Anyway, next up, we have probably the weirdest part in this entire episode, which is something I've been looking forward to talking about. That is Shift Dash. Shift Dash would have 2 different drivers, effectively. Well, it has 2 different tips in one driver. When normal, just the normal driver, it would look something like this. See how Quattro Dash, this also works for Zeta Dash, how it's like, when you're going between modes, you can kind of just have it like 2 drivers, just or 2 tips like sticking out like this, just weirdly. You can't launch it like this, but yeah. It would look like this normally. However, you'd basically be able to change the mode depending on how you put the bay together. Let me explain what each mode is. First up, one of them would be kind of a metal flat, and the other one would basically be a rubber sharp. So, how would these work? How do you, change the modes? There'd be a bit of a switch inside, kind of underneath, like the locking mechanism. What this would do is, when you put it together, depending on how you put it together, the first click would determine which way this would effectively fall towards. Either way, you could do whichever one. And if you choose left spin, it would become a rubber sharp. But if you, choose right spin and, click it that way, it would be a metal flat. So basically, yeah, it'd be based on the spin direction and how you click the bay. So when it bursts or is just not a part of anything, just kind of its own part, it is just kind of on that awkward point. But when you choose to actually, put it together, depending on which way you put it together, determines the actual driver you get, effectively. Moving on to the cores. Okay. First up here, we of course have the Apollos core, which would be a left spin core, 3B locks. Then we of course have the Artemis core, which is a right spin core, 3B locks. And there's the Eclipse core, which has, well, it's LR with 3B locks. I know technically Eclipse is just inherently better than the other 2, but like, yeah, it is kind of weird, but at the same time, I just felt like it makes the most sense to have Eclipse like that, so I just kind of said, yeah, I'm just going to do it. Why not? Apollos and Artemis have always just kind of been existing just there, so you can make Eclipse, I feel like, so I didn't feel too bad about that. And then lastly, we of course have the actual blades, Supernova and Collapse. So, Supernova, this would basically give you 4 contact points that would stick out as you lose spin. So like these spikes, you have 4 on each side, and then they basically start to stick out further as you lost spin. And then there's Collapse. Collapse, basically how this works is that you have, again, 4 contact points that would actually be crazier to begin with, but as it loses spin, they would actually go inward. So yeah, these 4 would be sticking out further. It's a technically an attack type, so that makes sense, but as you lose spin, they would retract and become much more round. And then BlackHole would literally just be one side would be spikes sticking out further, or spikes just kind of inward more with 2 large contact points, but then as it would, as the battle kind of continues, you'd end up with like, these 4 spikes just sticking out a lot, and then of course 2 kind of rounded spikes. It'd be very awkward. It's very weird, but I wanted to make this unique from Hyperion and Helio, since they kind of use the Eclipse gimmick, so I'm like, how do I do that? Let's do some stupid stuff here. Hopefully this bay made sense. It's by far my most ambitious bay of this episode. But I do like these. This is probably my favorite one of the episode, if I'm being honest. So hopefully this one made enough sense. It is cool. Alright, next up here, we have Imperator Forneus, not Yard Metal Dash 0. 0, I just think makes sense for this thing. Yard Metal Dash obviously has Yard. I opted to use Yard Metal, though, to get the metal ball, and make it a dash driver as well. So, there you go. As far as the new parts go, first up we of course have the Forneus core. This would kind of have a small spring and rubber lock. The spring would basically give it a very, very slight bound effect, not much, just a little bit. And you have rubber on the inside to give it a little bit extra burst resistance, and this would be very awkward as well, because you'd have rubber and a spring. It's meant to just make it very tanky. The spring is almost meant to help resist a little bit. So anyway. Plus the rubber, yeah, this would be a very awkward core to see in person, but yeah, I just wanted to give the concept. Also, yeah, one BU lock, or one set of BU locks, whatever you want to consider it, anyway. Next up we have the actual blade, Imperator. This would just have a lot of metal on the outside. That's literally, it's very round, with a lot of outer metal. And lastly, the actual disc, which is not. Not would be another BU lock disc, but this one would be a bit more interesting, because this one would actually have the inside part, the very inner part of the disc, would be plastic, and then the outside would be metal. Kind of an inverse of the BU lock discs. You would still have to accommodate like the actual BU lock tabs on the disc to make sure those work properly, but yeah. We know you could do this. We've had something like Paradox before, which had, you know, the plastic inside, so we know it's possible. This would just be a BU lock disc version of it, which is more interesting in my opinion, since, you know, these have always just been metal on the inside, plastic on the outside. Let's invert it, and I think it works well with kind of the metal distribution of the blade, with, you know, having a lot of it on the outside, so just a lot of outward weight distribution. I think it'd be cool, and a neat way to bring back Forneus in some fashion that's not just purely this as a DB bay. Alright, next bay we have Sear Salamander, Karma, Analog, Dash 10. So first up, Karma. It just works with this bay, come on. I mean, there's nothing else to say about it. Then 10, because it does have kind of a 10-blade mode. It was either this or 5, so I decided to go with 10. Anyway, as far as the core goes, the Salamander core, it is just 2 sets of BU locks, Sear, just like this, basically. You'd have the 5-bladed mode or the 10-bladed mode with a little bit of metal on the outer blades, at least half of them, like this is here. It's just a DB blade of Hell Salamander's lair. Anyway, then we have Analog Dash. This would basically be kind of like Operate, except you have a metal ball here, so that's cool. And you could have 5 different positions. You basically unlock it, well, you could keep it in the middle, but you can unlock it and kind of move it over in 4 directions, left, right, up, or down, just slightly tilted, and it'd basically just be very offset. But the idea is to make it like an analog stick, where, yeah, you'd have 4 different points, and I guess another analog stick could be moved in any way, but just to keep it consistent and not too weird, you know, I decided to just make it, you know, the 4 main directions, so yeah, there you go. That's how analog works. It's another kind of weird part, but I always like doing them, and other than that, this is just kind of a DB adaptation of Hell Salamander. Alright, our next bay here, Feral Hercules, Giga Constant 2. Giga, I just feel like makes sense for this thing. 2 also, these parts, they just kind of work for it, I think. Next up we have the actual Hercules core. This one's a bit interesting, so I do have 3 sets of BU locks for it, but also there'd be a shock absorption gimmick. Basically on the inside of the core by the teeth, kind of where like the springs are usually located for the bound cores, there'd actually be a little bit of rubber inside. The rubber would kind of be suspended a little bit, so it'd kind of be able to move a little bit inside. It's, again, a shock absorption gimmick. I think it'd be kind of cool to see something like that. Next up, well, Feral, these parts would basically be able to just move. Like, if you just tilted it like this part would just fall down. They'd just be kind of sliding around as they please and just always kind of be outward, rather than using gravity with, you know, the force and stuff and how it spins. Since we kind of gave that gimmick to O'Richalcum, I didn't want to infringe on that one, so I decided, let's just have this slide around and see what happens. Anyways, next up we have the constant driver. Constant would be, this would be something. So this would basically have a bit of a wider bottom. This main tip here would be a little bit wider, and also free spinning, almost a little bit like something like a gyro. And also this outer part would have, well, it would be plastic on the inside for the free spin part, but it would actually be rubber. Like the main plate itself would be rubber, and with a little bit of a wider inside that free spins. So that's the constant driver. Yeah, just kind of trying to make Hercules a little bit cooler, I guess. A little bit more going on, while also keeping the same idea that it had in the original form. Alright, our next bay is Grip Leopard Flip Shatter Dash 4. 4, in my opinion, just kind of works for this thing. Anyways, the Leopard core, this would have metal on the inside of the core. I feel like you can't really not have that with how this looks. So anyway, I have that. Also, 4 sets of BU locks. Grip, this would kind of have internal switches of sorts. So what these would do, you'd have kind of these outer parts with like metal on these sides. It would be upward like this. It wouldn't just, in these parts, this would stay up like this. But if a bay kind of hits this, it would kind of make a switch move very easily, and that switch would clamp down. And it would just stay like that. So yeah, it'd get one clamp down, and then it just kind of stays like that. I don't think there'd really be a great way to reset it without messing things up, so it's just, yeah, it clamps down, which kind of acts as a mode change, as like a hit-based mode change, which I think is a pretty cool idea. It's not perfect, but I do think, because like the clamp idea was always kind of dumb, but I think this makes the clamp idea at least a little bit more functional, a little bit more interesting, because again, it does have a mode change feature. It's not just a bound thing that was really dumb, so for this one, makes it work a little bit better. Anyways, the flip disc, this is actually a reused disc from Hades, because I did that one in part 6. Hades, it had flip, and flip basically, it was a B-lock disc that you could take the outer part and rotate it on an axis, so it would have a mode change, and it's kind of meant to emulate like what Lift does a little bit, where it can flip around. Anyway, finally, Shatter Dash. This is a new driver. This one is basically Destroy Dash, except this part here would be metal. Not metal, rubber. Sorry, this would be like a rubber jagged piece, and then this outer free spinning piece, that's metal. So you have the rubber that spins on with the metal plate. That is Shatter Dash, and it should be, it's interesting enough, I think. It's a solid way to evolve Destroy, since I didn't really do that before. Obviously, Longinus kind of went in a different route. I kept Metal Destroy on that one, so I'm like, oh, let's actually change up Destroy and do something a little bit different. So, Leopard, it seemed like a good candidate for that, so that's what I ended up going with. And for the final bay of this part, we have Celestial Egis Illegal Odyssey 8. I don't know, 8 just felt like a decent part. Also kind of references the Chosi customized set, which Orb Aegis released in, which released alongside Chosi Spriggan inside the set, so they share the armor. I just thought it worked, and it was also a little bit of a cool reference as well. Illegal, I think it just kind of works here. I know I could have reused Open, but from Ωrichalcum, which would have been fine, but I just thought, you know, Illegal is close enough to Outer, and I just thought it worked for some reason. Like, it just felt right instead of the other discs, so I went with that. Anyway, as far as the other parts go, let me just say, if Eclipse is not my favorite bay that I made in this part, Egis is, and that's going to mostly be on the driver. We'll get to the driver. Anyway, Egis itself, 2 sets of BU locks, that's all. Celestial Blade, this would have 4 metal balls. You'd have the 2 here, they'd be the same, just maybe a little bit larger, but yeah, they'd be free spinning, just kind of in place here. But then these 2 spots here would also have free spinning metal balls, so you'd have 4 of them. And then we get to the driver, Odyssey. So Odyssey would have a suction cup like this, except it'd be a little bit bigger to accommodate a larger bay. Just you know, maybe like about 1.2 to 1.4 times the size. Hard to say without getting a proper visual of that, but it'd be a bit bigger is what I'm trying to say. Nothing like huge, but you know, a little bit more. Anyway, and then we'd have an extra ring, kind of, maybe around like here-ish, in terms of where it'd be leveled, you know, about like there. It would be made out of rubber, So if it kind of hits a stadium, you'd be able to grip it a little bit, but also it'd be free spinning. So if it hits on the stadium, it would help to keep the bay upright, so it couldn't tilt too far over, while also being rubber, so it could help it to kind of, catch on the stadium a little bit, so it wouldn't get hit around either, and while also having the suction cup, and so it wouldn't be able to fall over. It just basically always stay up. It'd kind of do this for a while. It might lose spin from that a little bit easier, but still. This driver is meant to basically be a version of Quest that cannot fall over, which I wish existed. I was really hoping something like this would exist, but yeah, that is what Odyssey is here to do. It's meant to be a driver that actually turns Quest into a really stupid meme driver, into something that can genuinely function as a driver. Would it be perfect? It might still be stupid. It could still be terrible like Quest, but this should eliminate the biggest problems where it doesn't just fall over and scrape. So the rubber free spinning ring should help to keep it up. It has to be pretty large as well to make sure it doesn't fall over, but yeah, it'd be a huge help. The ring, it'd basically be spinning on the ring a lot as well, so hopefully that would help to make this bay actually functional. And if it did, this would probably be one of those parts I'd actually want to make into reality if I ever had the chance, which I don't know if I will, but if I ever did, this is probably one that I would be trying to go for. So anyways, that's about it for Egis. Hopefully it is it's mostly just like an evolution to Egis, but I just think that the driver would be so much better and more interesting. Like, I was just excited to talk about this thing, and its, evolution and how that would go. There you have it. That is Reimagining Beyblade Burst Part 9, BU Extended Part 3. Gonna be honest, this was the part I was dreading the most. There's just a lot of bays to get through, a lot of weird ideas. I feel like I couldn't put as much into each bay, because again, there's just been already just so many bays, and like I couldn't, like some of these bays I could do some stuff with, but others it was like, yeah, I mean, like, what else am I really to do other than make a GB adaptation? And that's kind of like the sweet spot with, I'd say, like, not God, with, like, kind of like the earlier stuff, with, like, duelers, because, like, yeah, I didn't have anything to work with, but I could conceptualize, there was, like, vague ideas there, and I thought that this would actually be easier, but I'm like, no, it's easier for making stuff because I can, just look at the gimmicks, but instead it feels a little bit limiting as well, because the gimmicks exist, it's hard to kind of evolve some of these gimmicks properly. So yeah, and just seeing how many bays I had to do in this video, I was like, oh god, this is gonna suck. Originally I was gonna do this in January, but I'm like, yeah, never mind, I'm doing this in February because I already have a lot of January videos, and this is gonna take a lot out of me. So yeah. But I finally did it. Next episode will be BU Extended Part 4, the finale. After that, I will have done and made every single bay that does not have a BU/DB form in the system. They will all be done, and I still have 4 more parts of reimagining after that, but still, this has been the most challenging part. And there's only, I think, 6 bays next time, I think. But I believe it's, I think Ashura, Joker, Hydra, Pegasus, Uranus, and Solomon. So those will be the 6 for next video. And that'll be the end of this arc of the Reimagining series, which has been a pain, if I'm being honest. So don't know when that'll be. Probably March or April. I was gonna do April, but I might honestly just do March and have it done with. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, there you go. That's this episode. This has been kind of the biggest hurdle for me that I've been trying to figure out what to do for, and it's finally done. Thankfully. So that's that. Let me know what you thought of this video. If you have any ideas, alternate ideas, or if you have any comments on these ideas, let me know. But anyway, that's it for now. So yeah, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.